Hi guys, Sandy here, and today we're talking about negative painting. Don't know what that is? You are in for a treat. And I've actually mentioned this in my masking fluid do's and don'ts video, but now I wanted to show you how to do it step by step. So let's get started. So negative painting is essentially when you're painting around your subjects rather than your subjects. And by painting the background instead of the featured elements, you're adding like this unique depth, this dimension to your painting. You don't need to use masking fluid for this. You can carefully just paint around your shapes, but I find that masking fluid makes life easier for beginners like us, and it also allows us to have, different layers of color, and I'll show you what I mean in a bit. The most important rule for negative painting is to wait for a layer to dry before adding the next, to prevent bleeding, but also, when you're using masking fluid, you can't really add it to wet paper, so just make sure it's nice and dry before adding a new layer, okay? We don't want any color mixing, we just want layering, okay? Glazing. Now for practice sake, you can just pick whatever template and use it for this. You just get a lid, you circle around it, you paint a layer, wait for it to dry, go and add some more circles, paint another layer, wait for it to dry, and so on. But I'm going to be drawing a pretty little forest and see what this takes us. So here we go. Now I am using Academy 100% cotton paper, and I'm using my lovely Schminke Horadam watercolors because they have lots of blues and greens, and that's exactly what I'm going for with this one. Now, if you can, pick a paper that allows wet on wet, that blooms really, really well, just to save yourself some trouble, because those blooms will do all the work for you. Also, if you're going to use masking fluid like I am, just test it on the paper first to make sure you don't ruin your painting when you try to remove it. It really, really sucks when that happens. I hate it. Now I want my first trees to be almost white, so I'm just going to draw them. Let's see. There's one. This is a bit of a cactus. We do all kinds of tree shapes, just like that. Okay, I think this is good for a first layer. So now I'm just going to wet my paper entirely, and we want it shiny, not pooling, okay? We don't want pools of water anywhere. So let's do this. Now, if you're using cellulose paper instead of 100% cotton paper, be aware that it dries much, much quicker, but it also pools much, much more. And this is because it doesn't absorb the water as well. Now we want a very, very, very light blue. Let's see. Now this may not look very light, but you know how it is. Watercolors dry lighter, right? And this is where the blooms come in handy. Look at that. They just tend to spread out and do all the work for you. And yeah, that's gonna dry pretty light. Now you can leave some white spaces, add a bit more color, add a second color, whatever you prefer, okay? I like that it's not completely uniform. I think it adds to the charm. And once you start uncovering the layers, once we're done, it will be much prettier this way, okay? I think I'm gonna go with a little bit of light green. Let's see how much I can light this green up. Maybe make it just, yeah. Now this is the only part, the tree part is the only part that we will be able to see once we're done. So if you're going to use other colors, concentrate on that part, because the other will just get all sorts of layers on top and we will not be able to see it. Okay guys, what do you think? I think we are done with our first layer. Okay, so now I'm going to use my heat gun to dry this layer, and this is the first and last time I'll be able to use my heat gun, because you can't use your heat gun on masking fluid. It makes it almost impossible to remove. So if you want your masking fluid to dry quicker, cool air is all you can use, or just patience and wait for it to dry. Oh, there we go. Okay. Now remember, rule number 1, do not smell this, it's disgusting. I can smell it from here. Rule number 2, don't shake it. Just, you know, go with your brush a little bit like this, if you don't want to get your clumps, you know, sooner rather than later. If it's too dry, if it's too clumpy already, add a little bit of water and you will be fine. Oh God, is this smelling worse and worse every time I use it? Sure looks like it. Okay, so now I'm just going to apply masking fluid straight away so it can dry. So first I want to do a little bit of a moon right here. Cute little moon. So that's first. You want to use enough masking fluid that it creates an easy to remove layer, but you don't want to add so much that it makes life harder for yourself when you try to remove it. Okay, now a little bit of stars. Not that many, just a couple. I'm gonna have bigger ones, smaller ones. Okay, now for our trees, you can apply masking fluid to the whole thing or just the edges, which is what I will be doing, okay? No need to cover the whole thing as far as I'm concerned. I just want to be able to paint around it without having to be very, very careful as I get near that line, okay? So, just go along the edges, preferably inside the line. If we paint inside the line, once we start painting around it, the line will just disappear, which is great. Definitely smell it from here. If you cover anything that you don't want to be covered, you can wait for it to dry and then remove the masking tape before you continue, no problem. So I'm not painting the entire trees, just the lines around it to make sure I can paint easily without going over these lines. That's all I need. Now this brush, I rubbed it on some soap before I did this to make sure that once I rinse the masking fluid out, it will look almost as good as new. It won't be 100%, I can tell you that. I have tried many, many times. It's never really, really perfect, but it's good enough. It makes it last a little bit longer than if you don't use anything. So I think it's worth the trouble. And you can see as it dries, it becomes more and more yellow. That's one way to know if it's good enough to be removed, if it's dry enough to be removed. Once it gets really, really yellow, you know. So that's one way to do it. almost there. Okay, first layer, nice and coated. And now we wait for it to dry, and this is a patient. Okay, first layer, nice and coated. And now we wait for it to dry, and this is a patience exercise, okay? There's just no way to do it otherwise, so I will be right back. Okay guys, I'm back, and as you can see, this is already pretty nicely dried, and I have just drawn my second tree line. So now we just wet it again, and don't worry about the masking fluid. You can wet it as much as you want, just not add it to wet paper, okay? So here we go. Wet this again. Is this wet? Is this dry? Yeah, this is dry already, so we can wet it. I'm pulling is not good. Okay. Gonna go down here, there, keep going. And now I don't have to worry about getting any of my first layer trees wet because they're nice and protected. So I can just go ahead and paint around it without having to worry about going over these lines. The lines are protected, everything is okay. As long as I don't go inside the masking fluid, I'm good. And if you think you may go over the masking fluid, you know, just paint the whole thing. Okay, I think this is nice and wet, and I'm ready to go. Now I'm going to pick a somewhat darker color. Now as you can see, I can try and paint over the masking fluid, but it's not having it. See? It's just, it doesn't care that I'm trying to paint over it. When we started, it was daytime, and now it's slowly turning into nighttime. And I know I say this all the time, but just to make sure we remember, always go light to dark, okay? You cannot go dark to light in watercolors. And that's why we started light, and then we go dark. Look at that, see? I don't have to worry if I'm going over the line, because my line is nice and protected. I just need to paint. No problem. And that's why masking fluid is such a great tool for beginner watercolor artists. So that way I can focus on making sure that the colors are exactly as I want them, right? That's a very good thing. And remember, you know, the sky is going to be covered by our next layer, so we need to worry about the kind of color we want on our trees. You know, the trees we drew, which are the trees where we're going to go and cover with masking fluid, those are the ones that we need to focus on color-wise to, you know, to make the desired effect. Because this is going to get all kinds of layers. And if you're worried because right now you can't see the lines you drew, don't worry. Okay? Once this is dry, it will go lighter and you'll be able to see them much better. Now, shall we add a little green to our trees? I think we should. This is a tree after all, right? So let's just go ahead. Now we don't even need to dilute them anymore. Let's just go ahead and add a little bit of green to our little trees. And yes, the more layers you add, the more time you'll have to wait for these to dry. That's fine. We don't mind that as long as we're happy with the end result. Watercolors is kind of a waiting game. There's no doubt about that. So just again, ooh, see, I went over the lines. I'm not worried because it's covered in masking fluid. And that's why this is such a great tool to have. And now we wait for it to dry again. You see where this is going, right? We add a layer, draw it, paint it, etc. And then we wait for it to dry, and then we add masking fluid, wait for it to dry again, and then we just add another layer and another until we're good with it, until we're happy with our result. Now, if you weren't using masking fluid, we'd have to wet around our trees carefully, and of course, we'd still have to wait for it to dry, because if you didn't, you just blend the colors, and that's not what we want. Now, let's do this a bit quicker, shall we? Okay guys, this is where we're at, and I am pretty happy with this. Now comes that magical time when we start removing our masking fluid to see what it uncovers. And if I did my job right, it should show several layers of trees from lighter to darker. Let's go. Now you can use your finger, you can use a sponge, you can use a rag. I love this part. I don't know if you can tell. This is very fun. Ah, I love it. And don't worry if the outline is a bit lighter than the rest, because we are not done yet. You know me, I always like to add my doodling pens to finish all my work. So we will be doing that. Now, if I'm honest with you guys, and I'm always honest with you guys, the reason why I am having this discoloration problem is entirely my fault, of course, is because I did not allow my paint to dry enough before I adding my masking fluid. So what happened was, as I applied the masking fluid, I lifted my paint. I noticed my brush getting blue, I totally saw it happen, but I kept going. So take this as a cautionary tale to always allow your paint to dry before adding your masking fluid. Okay, our masking fluid is gone, and this is what we've got, but we're not done. I'm just going to get my gold watercolor and play with it a little, or ruin the whole thing. I don't really know which one, but I will be finding out. And this is what we've got. We are done with our negative painting, and I love, love, love it. I hope you do too. I hope you give it a try and let me know how it went. Thank you for doing this with me. I clearly had a blast. I hope you did too, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye bye.